section is an introduction by the area commander, Scott MacDonald, who's basically highlighted some of the key points for the year. So in terms of statistics, the analysis of statistics is key to what we do and how we go about policing, although at the moment we obviously have to be very careful in terms of statistics due to the effect that the COVID lockdown period has had on them and the likes of the 5-year averages. Now that we've come out of COVID challenges, we're now facing real cost of living challenges, which are impacting on communities and families. And obviously our team continue to work with our partners to protect vulnerable people within the communities. So throughout the period of the report, we've maintained our presence on Highland roads, enforcing road traffic legislation, which I'll come on to in some of the statistics. We've obviously continued to engage with the visitor management plan and the visitor management groups, working with our partners to ensure that the Highlands continues to be a safe and enjoyable place to visit. In terms of crimes of violence, there is an anticipated increase in assaults as social distancing was removed and all COVID restrictions lifted. But it is pleasing to see a reduction in the number of serious assaults and assaults on emergency service workers. Overall, acquisitive crime in the area remains low. I'll come on to talk about fraud, which has increased, and that is a national picture in terms of fraud, and I'll come on to talk more about that. You'll note from the report there's a significant increase in missing person inquiries from last year, and again I'll speak more about that when I come to that section. So overall, incidents of hate crime remain low across the entire division. It is pleasing to see that there was no instance recorded within this area during the period under review. I'll talk a wee bit about our work in relation to serious and organised crime. And finally, the area commander commented that Police Scotland's looking to implement new technology, which we hope will continue. Obviously, budget announcements of cuts to the police service mean that these may not happen as quickly as we had hoped. Moving on, local policing priorities. So at the moment, our policing priorities are road safety and road crime, antisocial behaviour, violence and disorder, acquisitive crime, protecting vulnerable people, serious and organised crime, and terrorism and public order. The next page of the report is the area at a glance, and I'll just quickly cover this before going into more detail. So for road safety and road crime, overall road crime offences have increased against the 5-year and the last year to date figures. I'd have expected that as people are out and about more now that the lockdown has ended and people are going about their lives as normal. There was a slight decrease in mobile telephone offences detected. In terms of failure to insure against third-party risks, so insurance offences, there's a decrease on the 5-year average, but an increase on the last year to date. So both of the offences highlighted there are as a result of proactive policing, officers out on patrol detecting that. In terms of antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, so overall antisocial behaviour has increased on the 5-year average but decreased on the previous year. Offences in relation to common assault have increased against both the 5-year and the last year to date. And as said already, offences in relation to serious assault have decreased against both the 5-year and the last year to date. For acquisitive crime, there's been a decrease in the 5-year average, but an increase compared to the last year to date. In terms of housebreaking to dwelling houses, it's pleased to know there has been none in the reporting period, which is a decrease on the previous year and the 5-year average. In terms of protecting vulnerable people, overall sexual crime has decreased against the 5-year average, but did increase against the last year to date. In terms of domestic related offences, it's pleasing to see that that's decreased against both the 5-year and the last year to date figures. And as previously said, hate crime, there was 0 within the reporting period, which is a decrease. In terms of serious and organised crime, we report on supply offences. So they've increased against the 5-year and the last year today. So the nature of that crime, that is proactive police investigations that detect that offences. In terms of counter-terrorism and domestic extremism, we don't report any figures in relation to that, but there is a section from our local counter-terrorism officer which is there to read, and within that there is information regarding training that is available. Going in a bit more in depth into the various priorities, so road safety and road crime, as documented there, fatal road accidents have increased compared to the previous year to date, an increase of 3, unfortunately. Drink driving or drug driving offences have decreased very slightly. They've gone down by 2, and speeding offences have decreased by 8. I think probably what's worth highlighting is it's the figures for drink and drug driving. There's still 16 people being caught, so it's disappointing to see that people continue to take that risk, but it's good to see they are being detected. In terms of our overall strategy, so we continue to use Operation Cedar, which is to challenge, educate, detect and reduce in terms of road safety and road crime. That's led by our colleagues in road policing, supported by local police officers. Moving on to antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, which includes alcohol and drug misuse. So in terms of murders, there was none, thankfully. As common assaults have increased very slightly. Serious assaults have gone down by 1, and drug possession offences have gone down by 9. In relation to preventative work we're doing, there's a section in the report regarding the harm prevention officer, which was an 18-month pilot, which was funded by Highland's Alcohol and Drug Partnership. So that project is due for review very shortly, and it's hoped that funding will continue to keep that officer in post. So that's an officer who's based in headquarters but looks at people who are vulnerable to exploitation as such, in terms of county lines or cuckooing type activity, trying to identify the vulnerable people and gets the correct support agency into them to assist them. There's also a section on No Knives, Better Lives, which is an anti-violence campaign which we continue to deliver in schools across the division. Moving on to acquisitive crime, as I said, it's pleased to see there was no house break-ins to dwellings. Fraud has increased from 6 to 12 in the reporting period. What I would say is this continues to be a national trend of fraud, particularly online or telephone scams. We do a lot of work to put out media messaging in relation to scams, but unfortunately they're ever evolving and they are fairly sophisticated. So we continue to put messaging out, but unfortunately the numbers are increasing, but this is a national picture. In relation to other types of fraud work we do, we've got the banking protocol, which is a proactive initiative with financial institutes based throughout the division, where they will inform us of concerns they have if somebody is vulnerable to financial exploitation or are the victim of an ongoing crime in relation to financial matters, and we will try to intervene. That's been very successful, the number of frauds prevented whilst they were in the process of taking place. So a section on Rural Watch, which I would encourage you to sign up for, which gives you alerts in relation to crimes within your community. Moving on to the next section, which is protecting vulnerable people. As I've said, sexual crime has increased but remains below the 5-year average. Domestic crime has reduced, which is pleasing to see, and there was no hate crimes. I mentioned earlier there had been an increase in missing persons. So what I will say is it's important to note that the figures that are quoted in this report are not specific to your ward area. They are to the divisions, to N division. We can't break them down any further to ward areas for missing people. But the trends we see are trends across the whole division. So missing people have gone up, particularly in terms of looked after children. So in relation to that, we have an officer allocated to each looked after children home as a liaison officer. So they look to work with the staff and also the residents of the home to support them to try and reduce the number of incidents where they go missing. So that's ongoing work. Hopefully we'll see the benefits of that. Moving on to serious and organised crime, as I've highlighted in terms of the figures, the drug supply offences have increased, and so that's a result of proactive police investigations to detect offences. There's a section on county lines activity. So as with many rural areas, we continue to be vulnerable to county lines activity, which is inshore criminality from out with the area, criminals coming in, and serious and organised crime taking place within our communities. In relation to that, we have recently expanded the team that targets that, put extra officers into that, and they work across the division. They're a divisional unit supporting each of the command areas. The next page details counter-terrorism. Again, I'm not going to read that out. It's just information provided in terms of RAP and ACT training that is available to communities and agencies. The report finishes with the crime statistics, which I think I've covered all the key statistics and don't intend to go through them all. They're there and available to read. But I'm happy to take any questions that you wish on the report.
Thank you, Inspector Ross. Any members got any questions, Inspector Ross? Liz?
Yes, yeah, sorry, I was just getting my mic. Thanks for that really interesting report. I just wanted to come back. The two things that stood out were the fraud. I'm glad you actually gave that Rural Watch that we can sign up to, because I think that is something that as members of the communities, if we work with you, that we can raise awareness and support and signpost. So thanks for that. The missing persons was quite yeah, massive increase. It's interesting that you've identified the looked after children, and great to hear you're working with that. But there's also been, if I got the figures right, an almost doubling of adults. So I just wondered, is this something you're seeing nationally? Have you any idea what's behind this? Thanks.
Yeah, so your 2 points. The first one in terms of frauds, yes, it'd be helpful if councillors could help with that messaging out there in terms of frauds. It's an ever continuing battle to keep the messaging going for that, to try and prevent frauds. In terms of missing people, so what I would say is we need to bear in mind that probably for the last year to date, we were just at the end of lockdown. People weren't out and about as much. So to see an increase is probably not unexpected in terms of adults and looked after children. And yeah, as I've highlighted, we are working in terms of reducing the number of looked after children. In terms of the adults, yes, maybe not quite doubling. It's about a 50% increase. It's gone from 47 to 71. But there can be many reasons for the adult ones are slightly more complicated. As suggesting there's many reasons why adults choose to go missing. So we do look for trends, and we do try and, particularly if somebody's a repeat missing person, we try and get support services into them to help reduce that risk that they pose.
Thank you. Any other members got anything? No? Well, thank you for that very detailed report, Inspector Ross, and we'll let you go now. I'm sure you have a lot of important work to do. So
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Now we have a report by Ms. Roads Officer Ian Moncrief.
Thank you, and good morning, councillors. Well, perhaps we should maybe start off with the budget. The capital budget for Ross and Cromarty, the baseline budget is set at just under £1.1 million. And at this point in time, we only have last year's budget to plan our capital programme for the coming season. The 22-23 budget is in the report, and it shows the baseline budget followed by a £10 million capital allocation and then a health and prosperity strategy budget. Neither are the 10 million or the health and prosperity budget are going to be carried forward at this point in time. So we're only looking at that baseline budget of just under 1.1 million. This budget is going to be finalised around about maybe late spring, but it allows us something to start planning for. So as you're aware, we have 4 areas in Ross and Cromarty, but there's only one Ross and Cromarty capital budget. And that budget is split up in terms of the different areas in terms of the road mileage. So in Ward 5, or west of Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh, there's 798 kilometres. Ross and Cromarty has a total of 1,651 kilometres, which means that Ward 5 has 48% of the road length. Consequently, I've set the budget for Ward 5 at the 48%, which gives us £522,000. When we last met on the 5th of December at the Ward 5 business meeting, we reviewed the schemes that we were going to put forward, and there was a red line drawn to show the schemes that could be afforded from the baseline capital, and anything below that red line would be funded if additional money was made available. There's 3 types of works. Surface dressing, where we spray a bitumen water emulsion onto the road before spreading and rolling in stone chips. This helps to seal the road surface and improve skidding resistance. This predominantly helps to extend the road's remaining life and also reduces the risk of the freeze-thaw cycle because it seals the cracks. Overlay is basically where we screed out a layer of tar, which is typically dense-bound macadam. It's usually in layers 40 mil thick, and this adds strength to the road. And typically we would use this where the road has deteriorated too far to allow us to surface dress. And in urban areas where we're working to curb levels, ironwork in the road surface, and indeed sometimes even air bricks in houses, we would use inlay, which is very similar to overlay, except that we would remove the corresponding thickness of tar before putting it back first. So, as I said, the schemes above the red line we can fund from our baseline capital budget, and below the red line would be funded if additional money was made available. So the schemes that can be funded, there's 2 sections of the Tarby Township Road to be surface dressed. There was Rue Road, which is going to be overlaid. A section on the A896, Torridon to Kinloch U, a fairly big section to be surface dressed, 5.5 kilometres almost. On the A834, Strathpeffer Main Street, we've got down 100 square metres there, sorry, 100 metres in length. That's up by Canellan Drive as you head out towards Jamestown. The C1223 Glenelg to Donovan Sawmill to the Glenelg Village Junction. That road is actually being improved under the Strategic Timber Transport Scheme. So what I would suggest is that we could remove that from the list and put the money into the Glenelg Road and a small section on the Moyle Road.
Yeah.
On the 896, this is from Lochcarron, Church Street Junction, as you leave Lochcarron, going up to the cattle grids, way up the hill, just 2.2 kilometres surface dressing, and just above the red line is the C1055, letters Logie Road, 750 metres of overlay. Very quickly, below the red line and subject to additional funding, the 896 Shepherd's Cottage to the school at Lochcarron, that's as you approach from the east. The 890 Achnasheen to the west, that's continuation of where we got to for the surface dressing. The 835, and this is Moorfield Industrial Estate in Ullapool, down to the junction with the trunk road. That was again for surface dressing. And the Marybank, there's a small section there which is starting to fail, 120 metres, and Diabeg Village and the Hill, 2.6 kilometres of surface dressing. So, in conclusion, the area has a budget of £522,000, and it includes 8 schemes covering both strategic and local routes. I'll ask members to approve the programme, and I'll be pleased to take any questions.
Chris?
Thank you very much for that. Obviously, I must express an interest when I talk about Strathpeffer. It's my home town, but it is just my own observation. You list 100 metres along the main streets to Kennellan Drive, but in my view, what is in appalling state is the road between Strathpeffer and Dingwall itself. There are stretches of that which are really awful, but you don't seem to have them listed. Any comments?
Yes, certainly. We had received, I believe we had received complaints about the section at the Kennellan Drive, and there are many sections of roads that need work done on them. In some ways, it's a bit like you can't fail to hit a target. What you're trying to do is trying to pick out the sections which you think are maybe the worst, or maybe where you're getting the most complaints. I don't see much point in producing a complete list of all the roads that are defective or needing repairs, because different roads, depending on what the defects are and where they're located, will deteriorate at different rates. So the operation becomes very repetitive every year to try to update that list, and the budget isn't anywhere near to cover sufficient enough to cover the repairs there. So I'm trying to give you a section where I think where I see the worst sections are, but it's certainly not exclusive.
Yes, I mean, I quite see that. It's just that my observation is the bit you're going to repair is in much better state than much of the main road to Dingwall. However, that's
I'd be happy to swap that out for a different section, Councillor Burt.
Patrick, you were next.
Yes, just a very quick question, just out of curiosity. You mentioned that kind of under the red line is provisional on additional funding. Is what's under the red line in any list of priority at all, or is it just random?
No, it's not in any list, any set prioritised list. It's a bit difficult because we don't know if there's going to be any additional funding, and if there is going to be additional funding, we don't know what we're going to get. So there may be sections that we can afford, and maybe sections that we can't afford. So I would be happy to come back to our business meeting and discuss what we do with those schemes at a later date.
Thank you. Liz? Liz?
Hi, yeah, so thanks for that, Ian. It really isn't an easy job. And I'm glad that Patrick asked that question, actually, because that's important to know. I'm delighted to see the C1055 on the list. I've just emailed you today again, I think. I just wanted to ask, the 750 metres, I have driven along that road a lot, but I'm not a very spatial person. Is that the whole length of that road? It's longer than 700, or which part is actually being overlaid? So that's the first question. And the other question is, I think just for constituents, the reassurance that, you know, I know particularly the A832 going out past Achenalt is particularly bad at the moment. So it's just to reassure constituents that even if a road isn't on the capital plan, we are aware and there will be ongoing, as you know, obviously as your teams can get to it, ongoing repair and patching. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Craft. I'll looking at the letters Logie Road, that is an initial estimate, 750 metres. That was put in, when was it now? It was back in December, I think I met you at the ward business meeting. So the programme was hardened up a little bit around about the December. And I believe I had all my capital reports issued or sent off before Christmas. Since then, we've been out on site and we've had a good look at the road, and we're in the process of preparing plans. Now, if that 750 drops to 730, okay, if it increases to 800, I'm not particularly bothered because I am pretty certain I can fund that. What is clear is that we need to take each of these schemes and then we prepare specific plans detailing all the costs and all the elements of each one. But given the fact that this is based on a notional budget, this is, if you like, as accurate as we can really be at this point in time. The A832 at Achenalt, it's not on the capital programme, but yes, we are aware that at this time of the year there's an awful lot of potholes. We always get potholes during the winter. I asked one of my roads officers to start preparing for the surface dressing operation, which starts in the surface dressing itself starts around about maybe June, but ahead of June it's critical that we get all the bits of a kit that we need to do the patching. And I'm not particularly concerned whether we're patching on roads that are going to be surface dressed or patching on roads that aren't. Clearly the A832 is an important road, and I would expect that to be done as soon as we get the kit and as soon as we're out of winter.
Thank you, Ian. I think it's my turn to talk now. I'll let everybody else say something. You speak about Ross and Cromarty budget. Please include Lochalsh. We are Lochalsh, Wester Ross and Strathpeffer. Even in the police report, Lochalsh seems to be missed out. And I drove twice to Ullapool last week, and honestly, from Asmachellas to Carve is like a bombed site. You have to pick your places on the road where you can drive. It was horrendous. The stress level, my stress levels were way high. It's really awful. I know you haven't got the budget to try the whole thing, but get that Pothole Pro out there as quick as possible, please. And then I was down at the Howard Dora Centre also, and there's a little area before you come to the Howard Dora Centre, below the Blythewood. That's just horrendous. It's not a large area, but it needs the Pothole Pro as well. We know you haven't got the budget, but get that Pothole Pro out. I don't know if that emulsioning of roads is that good value, really, because areas, say, on the Stone Ferry bypass, that's been done, say, within the last 2 years, it's starting to wear again. And of course, the bypass is needing attention too. It always is. And I know we can't make a magic wand like money. You're restricted with your budget, and it's so difficult. See, the Machine Road, they use that road from Skye. They drive from Skye, and the boat, fortunately, is all they're repairing the pier from Oud to Stornoway, so there's not quite so much traffic. But come Easter, you'll get all the traffic coming from there to the Isles that don't use the Liverpool one. There's a lot uses the Oud one, and Skye people going that way to Dingwall and Inverness. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to take some of those issues in turn, I mean, the Ross and Cromarty budget includes Skye. Sorry, includes.
Oh no, not Skye. Sorry.
My apologies. The Ross and Cromarty budget includes Lochalsh. So I'll try to remember that in future. When I say Ross and Cromarty, I'll say Ross, Cromarty and Lochalsh. But it's all included in the one budget. And on our spreadsheets, it's just called Ross and Cromarty. That's why I didn't include Lochalsh, but it is included in the figures. The road at Achnashillock, yes, I appreciate that's really bad. And there's, at this time of year, we get a lot of potholes with the freeze thaw action. I know my road officer Andrew Bone will be out and about trying to do as best he can in between delivering winter operations. But at present, as you're well aware, we have ever increasingly restrictive driver's hours to comply with, which means that it places a very tight margin on what we can legally do and what we can't in terms of how many hours our men are working. As I said earlier, we're already prepping for the surface resting, and we're booking out pavers, planers, and all the kit we need to make sure that we can start patching the roads as soon as winter's over. And I'll include those sections that you talked about.
And I mean, we're always honoured you, but I must congratulate the Andy Bones team for the Pothole Pro. It makes so much difference.
Yes, it's been a very useful, and it's got very good reviews. In terms, yeah.
Sorry, Ian, you never finished.
In terms of surface dressing, surfacing where we overlay or inlay a road, that adds strength to a road surface. Surface dressing doesn't really add any strength. It extends its life. It seals the road. It stops the water getting in. It improves the skid resistance, but it doesn't increase the road's capacity to carry traffic. The reason
some of the fault is the drainage. The drainage gets the water. Lack of drainage brings water on the road.
I would agree, Councillor Campbell. I mean, better drainage would certainly help extend our roads' lives. The reason we use surface dressing is that even allowing for the recent inflation, typically with a bit of patching we would be expect to pay something in the region of about £6 a square metre to surface stress. If we were to overlay the road, we could expect something in the region of £25 a square metre. And if we had to inlay the road, you could be looking at round about £30 a square metre. Given the state of our budgets and the length of our road network, it seems prudent to seal the roads, improve the friction, and extend as much of our road network's life as possible. And that's why we went for the surface dressing. That tends to be on our A-class roads, on our strategic routes, whereas some of the smaller roads, for instance, like the Letters Lowy Road, that's clearly gone beyond what can be surface dressed, and we're looking at an overlay. The other schemes there on below the red line at Marybank, we felt as though we had to inlay that. We couldn't get out of doing any surface dressing there. It was too far gone. Whereas, I mean, you'll see that some of the other schemes, the A896, just above the red line, Church Street junction to Lochcarron, to the cattle grid at Lochcarron, with a bit of patching, we felt that we could extend that road's life and still achieve over 2 kilometres. Clearly, with a difference in rate from somewhere in the region of about £6 a square metre for surface dressing to £20 a square metre for overlay, the length of our road network would be seriously reduced, that we could actually improve or treat each year if we only used overlay. So we have to have a balanced view.
Thank you, Ian. Chris?
Yes, this just concerns the further eastern end of the route that Biz was talking about, from Skye on the west to Inverness. I was driving to and from Achnasheen last week, and I was horrified at the number of potholes that had developed in that road during the winter. Quite horrified. I mean, one has to veer to right and left to avoid them. Obviously, that's something that your pothole machine could deal with, but I was really astonished at the extent to which that road had deteriorated through potholes during this winter.
Thanks, Chris. Anybody else? Liz, you got your hand up again?
Yeah, so just one last question about the repairs. So we all know the state of the roads, we all drive them, and clearly the teams can't be everywhere at once. Clearly there is a limited number of, hot boxes and pothole repairers. So I just wondered, when you get all these emails from us and the pictures and all the rest of it, what criteria do you use when you're looking at what bits of road to repair in the ward?
Well, that's a difficult question, and I guess everybody's got different views on that. But one of the things that I try to keep in mind is that if you're in a rural area, you tend to go faster. And if you hit a bad pothole doing 50 or 60, you're likely to cause damage to your car, or perhaps lose control, maybe have an accident. So clearly there's a speed issue. The faster you can expect the traffic to go, the more severe the consequences if you don't repair the potholes. However, the flip side to that is that in an urban setting, in a town or a village, you're going to get an awful lot more traffic passing, albeit at a slower speed, over the same potholes. So it's trying to balance out the speed versus maybe the number of vehicles. I would also say that a third factor is perhaps the strategic nature of the road. So if you take an A-class road, it's going to carry more traffic than a U-class road. And somewhere in there, there's a it's like a sliding scale. Somewhere in there is the sweet spot where we can deal with all the potholes that are needing to be done first. But how I consider it and how somebody else considers it is going to be open to debate. You know, we all have our own views. Clearly, I mean, members' views are taken very seriously, and we put a lot of thought into where we deploy our resources. But I cannot emphasize enough that the amount of man hours that we have available in winter, when we have to provide winter services, winter operations in morning and at night, is significantly less because of the driver hours regulations and fatigue limits.
Could I now move the recommendation from Ian to the members, please? Thank you. And thank you, Ian, for coming to our meeting this morning.
Not at all, Councillor Campbell. Just before we maybe vote on it, there was the issue with the Glenelg to Donovan sawmill to the village junction. Would you be happy with us?
I would go with your recommendation.
Okay, we'll switch that to Glenbeg and Moyle Road.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is the Housing Investment Officer, Jonathan Henderson. Jonathan, are you here?
I am,
Yeah,
Councillor Campbell. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, members.
Give us an HRA capital programme report, is it?
That's correct, Councillor Campbell. I'll give a brief introduction to the report, if that's okay, and happy to take any questions that members may have. So in front of you is the Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh HRA capital programme proposed for 23 to 27, along with a current year update, so that's 22-23. Section 5 of the report, just to pick that out, gives a brief update on the current year programme. Section 6 of the report details the development of the 23 to 27 proposed HRA capital programme, along with Appendix 1, which gives a bit more detail on the recommended priorities for investment across the area. Looking at those figures, obviously, we are recommending really prioritising works on energy efficiency within our stock, and we had good discussion and debate about that at a recent Ward Business meeting, members. So also in the Appendix 1, just to note, is the continued commitment towards aids and adaptations work within our stock. So we've got that budget there. So really that budget is just aimed at allowing us to carry out works on our stock, which help to keep people in their homes for longer. So happy to take any questions, Chair, and also just to say that we're in the process of developing the finer detail of the programme, and would return to a future Ward Business meeting happily to discuss in more detail with members. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any member got any questions for Jonathan? No? In that case, do we approve the HRA capital programme? Yes? Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks for coming along this morning.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. Now we have the housing, well, we have the assistant housing manager. Sorry if I've got your post wrong. Housing manager North, management North. Your title right, Derek. We've got Derek Manson to give us a housing revenue account for gather trends.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Chair, just to correct you slightly, I'm Principal Housing Officer. I'm here on behalf of Jake Mitchell, who is the new Area Housing Manager for the North.
We haven't forgotten you, Derek. We missed you when you left our area committee.
Thank you, Councillor. That's very kind.
You went back to your former post. And
I did. I'm glad to be back. Thank you, Councillor Campbell. That's
welcome back. And
thank you.
We originally were supposed to have Jake Mitchell, but it was changed to you, and we welcome you very warmly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The paper before you today is the Housing Revenue Account garage rent setting for 23-24 for garages within Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh. I'm not going to go through the whole report. I'm just going to highlight some parts to you, and happy to take any questions afterwards. In section 6.3, you can see the modelling that we've carried out for a 3 and a 5 and a 7% increase to garage rents. Housing is recommending that members agree to a 7% increase, and the additional revenue generated will be ring-fenced for garage repairs and improvements to make them a more attractive proposition, especially when we're carrying voids, garage voids, which are not currently let at this time. The voids are highlighted within the report at 5.2. That's my summary for the report, and I'm happy to take any questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any member got any questions for Derek? Chris?
Yes, thank you very much for that. I've had complaints from people with garages in Strathpeffer saying the garages are just too small for their cars. I must say they do seem extremely small. I mean, maybe they were designed when people had much smaller cars, but it's been pointed out that particularly with electric cars, they tend to be bigger. I'm not sure that's true, but that's the general opinion amongst people. And the result is that quite a lot of these people, I think of one particular street, they leave their cars outside in the street rather than use their garage. I was discussing this with one of your housing colleagues, and it was suggested that maybe the best thing in those garages was to demolish the lot and rebuild them slightly bigger. But I don't know what your general comment is as regards the size of garages in relation to people's cars.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Anecdotally, we're aware that garages are historically not big enough for a lot of people's vehicles these days. So that is just you're absolutely correct in your assertion that the garages were built a very long time ago, when a lot of vehicles were significantly smaller than they are now. So I'm afraid that is a legacy issue that we're dealing with. We're currently undergoing an appraisal of garages council-wide and looking at what we're doing with garage sites where garages are not being used. And we also know that lots of people don't actually use their garage for storing, for storing their car overnight, and lots of people use them for other reasons, general storage being one of them. But yes, it's a valid point that a lot of people are renting garages that they don't fit cars into, but that is a legacy issue in terms of the size of modern cars. Electric cars, I'm not an expert. I just think cars are generally bigger now than they have been in the past. So as I say, that's the legacy issue that we're dealing with.
Patrick?
Yes, thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Firstly, when electric cars were mentioned, I always have to say something. Is there any capacity for a tenant or the council to install an EV charger in the garage? Obviously, if we're moving to EVs, then If someone has a garage, that's the ideal place to charge them. So that's my first question. My second question was, I was at the Housing and Property Committee a few weeks ago, and they were discussing, I'm not a member, but they were discussing council house rent increases, and they'd gone through a consultation process with the tenants. I was wondering if there was any consultation process that's been gone through in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Logue. In terms of electric charges into garages, that's something that any existing tenant would need to make a request to their maintenance officer. I can't think of any reason as to why that, you know, if the garage was structurally sound, then I can't think what reason that would be, other than what's previously mentioned by Councillor Burt, which is that they may not actually be able to store their electric car in their garages. That doesn't necessarily mean they might not want to put in an EV charger. What I will do, Councillor Logue, is get some information from our energy team who are dealing with EV charging and see if they can provide you with a more robust response to your question. But from my point of view, I don't think there's a reason why that couldn't happen, assuming the garage was structurally sound. We have carried out tenant consultation with regards to garage rents as well as housing rents. So yes, that consultation exercise was carried out with tenants in terms of housing rent and garage rent.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, I think actually Patrick's covered my things. I also wanted to ask about EV chargers. And I understand you did a consultation, was that the garages only, where you looked at the options of the 5%, 7%, and what was the top one? 3%, 5% and 7%. And you feel that the 7% would be the most, the one that you would recommend. You know, like Patrick, we're all kind of concerned about the cost of living and the increase in lots of things. I find that quite, it's actually, even at 7%, it's not a huge amount more. Going from 920 to 985 the week, so a 65% increase. That's the first one for a council tenant. But that was following your consultation. So your consultation was asking tenants to look at the three options. Was that correct?
That's correct. And what we're proposing is a 7%. That's what we're proposing to members. You're right, Councillor Craft. You know, for a garage rent for a tenant, it's under the 7% is under £3 per month, and that's what's going to deliver the greatest return in terms of our contribution towards repairing and improving garages. So that's the reason that we're going. Of course, we're mindful of the cost of living situation that everybody is experiencing at the moment, but 7% will give us an increase that we can put towards improving and repairing our garages to an extent where we will be able to let them and therefore generate more income. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Chris? Can't hear you.
Sorry, my hand should have been lowered. I didn't.
Oh, sorry.
Before.
Right. Do we all agree the 7% garage rents? Yes? Yeah. Thank you, Derek, for giving us a housing revenue account on the garage rents.
Thank you, members. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Now we have our project officer, Sarah Lamb, for the Community Regeneration Fund applications. Good morning and thank you for coming along, Sarah.
Good morning, members.
We're ready and waiting for your report. Yes.
Okie doke. So community regeneration funding is an umbrella term for a number of funds that are available for communities to access in Highland. It comprises of the Highland Coastal Communities Fund and the Place-Based Investment Programme. So both are which the Scottish Government funding streams to support sustainable development in Highland. So area committees are awarded devolved allocations according to approved formula, and decision making on which projects should receive funding sits with elected members. So within the Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh, the following allocations are available for distribution. So the Highland Coastal Communities Fund totals £198,515.42, and the Place-Based Investment Programme is £68,160. So in total, the total funds available through the CRF is £266,670. £266,000 and £675.42. There are 8 applications under consideration today, with grant requests totaling £273,376. This figure is different to the figures presented in the committee paper, as there was an error with the figure for the Alt B application, where the paper shows an incorrect grant request of £23,500. So the correct figure for the level of grant requested there is £50,595. The CRF team have undertaken a technical assessment of all the projects, and I can confirm that all projects brought to members today are technically eligible. We've also provided a RAG assessment of key criteria to help members in their considerations. But I would note that the RAG assessment is undertaken on information that has been provided to us by the applicant during the application process. Where a project has been awarded red or amber against the criteria, this doesn't reflect the eligibility of a project, but it does flag up there are concerns. So, for example, that match funding decisions or consents are still pending, or that only brief information was provided within the application. If members wish to approve projects that have red or amber ratings, then we'd usually seek to address these concerns by applying technical conditions to any funding awards made. However, members will see from the RAG assessment provided today that the projects have scored very well against the criteria, so there's no red criteria set for any of the projects. So members are asked to decide whether to approve, defer or reject applications under consideration, and in the case of approvals, to agree the grant award amount and any conditions of funding you wish to attach. And members will be aware as well, this is just information, that the Community Regeneration Funds also administer the community-led local development funds on behalf of the strategic LAG. So the LAG have met, and just to confirm that they have awarded £122,589 towards the Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh area. And just to highlight as well that this fund is providing match funding for the Lochbroom Sailing Club and the Gale Action Forum applications that are going forward today. So with the correction to the Alt B Hall application, given that the funding requested is higher than the funds available, there's a current budget overspend of £6,701.21. So members will have to consider prioritisation of projects or a reduced offer of grant on some occasions. So I'll just introduce each project one by one, and members can indicate whether they are supportive of the project, and then perhaps at the end we can just review where we stand with the budget available. So the first on the list is the Lochbroom Community Council Quay Street Community Park project. This one is to install swing park equipment at the Quay Street Community Park in Ullapool. They're requesting a total of £25,000. They have taken on board members' previous feedback at expression of interest stage, which was to get further match funding in place. So they have actually managed to raise just under £45,000 from various sources. The project costs there include installation of a swing set, roundabout and a tri-climber, along with shelter and seating. I've marked them amber for project robustness and legacy, but this was just due to information not being provided at the application stage. So they have since followed up to confirm that they would work towards getting a partnership agreement in place with the Highland Council to deliver the project on their behalf. And they've also confirmed that the maintenance and insurance programme for the swing park would come under Highland Council's remit as well. So I'll hand that back to you, Chair, and to get comments from...
Is there any comments from any of the members on this application, the swing park, or do we all... Liz?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I do fully support this. There's been a huge amount of work done in the community to match fund. The community have been involved in getting the site ready to go. So I would just love to see this get the final funding and go ahead. I support it.
As do the other members, and I fully support this. From the information we've got from the community and the large amount of work they've done, I fully support it. Do the other members fully support it? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. We're on to the next one. Altby.
Okay. The next one is Altby Community Centre and Football Field Trust. This is for their Altby Hall Revival Phase 2 project. So this is to carry out remedial and renovation work to the main hall and bring it back into community use. The costs that they've included in their application are repairs to steel supports, various joinery work, window replacement, and electrical and kitchen equipment. The total project costs there are just over 74,000, and they are making a request of £50,595. At the time of application, the building warrant had been applied for in October 22, so they've expected that to be granted shortly, if not already done so, already confirmed. They have been ranked amber for match funding. That's just because they're waiting the outcome of £12,500 worth of match funding applications, and they have confirmed themselves a contribution of 11,000 towards the project.
Members, do you all support this? Yes? Yeah, we do. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, next up is
Balmacara
Community Trust. This is for the restoration of Balmacara Old Mill Hall. This is to replace the dilapidated roof of the Old Mill Hall to save the structure from irreparable damage and safeguard future restoration works. The funding request there is £61,760. The building warrant has been granted and they have match funding in place. The only thing there that has been marked down is the equalities criteria, and that's simply just because they didn't provide enough information within their application to score higher.
Thanks. I certainly fully support this. It's a very active group, and it'll be great to see a roof back on that hall again. Many's a day I have danced around that floor in days gone by, and it'll give me great pleasure to see this roof back on, and maybe those dancing days I'll be able to rejuvenate. Thank you. And other members approve of this application? Yes, there you are. And now thank you, Sarah. We've all approved this, and we're going on to Strathpeffer Residents Association.
Yep, so this one is for the construction of Strathpeffer Community Park. So they're wanting to create a community park in the centre of the village between the primary school and Ord Terrace. The funding requested is £99,979. The costs are based on quotes provided, and they have decided on the back of members' feedback at expression of interest stage to deliver the project in a number of phases. So their funding request within this application is for the forest climbing playground and to install a giant spinning disc and a combination swing. They still have a match funding application outcome awaited for £30,000. So they have been ranked amber for the match funding.
Thanks, Sarah. Do members approve? Chris?
I've explained before that I was on the committee for this in the past, but not now. And I have said that I would have thought if we need to save some money, a few thousand knocked off this application would not be unreasonable, put it that way. I support the project strongly.
Yes.
They need the new play park, very definitely. But I'm suggesting we could possibly make a small saving there.
Thanks for your help, Chris. Thank you. And Liz?
Yes, just to agree with Chris, I mean, it's been a massive piece of work ongoing and well done to all involved. But they do actually say in their application that they could scale the request up and down if funds allowed. And given the size, I think this is maybe one where we could make a bit of saving. And I'm happy to support with any fundraising locally if they need to make up a few thousand in the village.
Oh, well, there you are. Sarah, we all want to have the swings and the play park back in Strathpeffer. It's a very vibrant community, and we can see that if there's any adjustments to be made, that we can do it in this project. Thank you. Now we're on to Lochbroom Sailing Club.
Okay, so this project is to expand the provision of youth sailing opportunities. This one has been match funded by the CLLD fund, so the remaining amount requested from the area committee today would be to cover a shortfall in the purchase of the dinghies. They found the cost had gone up by just over £1,000, and the other costs included would be to renovate the shower in the clubhouse and also allow them to attend some instructor courses and powerboat courses. So the total funding requested for these items is just over £8,000.
Thanks, Sarah. Are members approve of this Lochbroom Sailing Club application? Yes? Yeah, we all do. Thanks, Sarah. Now we're on to Gala Action Forum.
Okay, this is for their Community Connections project. This is to provide and coordinate a package of health and wellbeing services within the Gairloch and Lochue community. Project costs include volunteer coordinator salary, including expenses, training and support work, along with counselling session fees and generic overheads. The total funding requested here is just over £12,000. If you look at the RAG assessment scoring, Legacy has been ranked amber. This is just due to the project aims is to reduce demand for services, for these types of services through having their local impact. So it's hoping that that will be the legacy of the project itself, but they have acknowledged that the project won't be self-sustaining, that it will require public funding in future to keep it going. So they haven't provided clear plans or evidence or acknowledged what will be required to sustain the project. And I mentioned there as well that the funding package had included generic overheads. This total amount to £3,600, which would be used to cover generic office costs, equipment and project admin. So for this reason, I have ranked value for money as amber, just because it would be expected for an organisation of this size that these costs would be covered through other income streams.
Thanks, Sarah. I think we all realise the genetic overhead costs for the office are a bit excessive for a group of this size. So any of the members got any questions for Sarah on this application? No? Right. We're on to Scotland Community Centre Group.
This is for the community centre roof repairs. So they want to commission a survey on the structural repair of the community centre roof and give options for improving energy efficiency with a view to the venue being carbon neutral. The total project costs there are 8,000 with a funding request of 5,000. They've been ranked amber for the equalities question just because they haven't provided detail within the application. However, they do have a business plan that details access, all abilities improvements to be made within the community centre. And the other thing to just highlight as a consideration is that costs are based on estimates, so not quotes received. But they are considered to be value for money, but there possibly is a risk that costs may rise in future.
Thanks, Sarah. Does anybody have any comments for Sarah on this application? No. Well, we're on to Plockton District Community, the last one, Plockton District Community Trust.
Okay, so this is for the buyout and development of the old post office in Plockton. The project itself is for professional services to achieve full architect drawings, planning and building warrant for a proposed extension to the building that would provide a toilet and a tea point. The total project cost there are £11,460 with a grant request of £11,000. They are currently applying for the acquisition of the building for a community buyout. They believe that the project itself for the buyout is a strong fit with the Scottish Land Fund and the UK Community Ownership Fund, so they're hopeful there of a successful outcome. But it's just to note that the legacy has been ranked amber just because we can't guarantee a successful outcome at this stage. But the Trust are in a strong position to attract funding for the community buyout. And also the match funding is quite a small contribution, so it is quite a large ask in relation to that. However, they are quite a small, relatively new community group with few income streams, so it's been deemed appropriate.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that report. Any member got any comments on that one? No, we all agree that one. So that ends all the applications today, and how that leaves us with an overspend of 6701.21. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, hello. We would like to approve all grants presented to us today. However, we have a shortfall of 6701.21. Having considered the report presented to us today, I would propose that the generic overheads requested from Gale Action Forum project are not included in the award, and the remainder of the shortfall is taken from the Strathpeffer Residents Association award. Do I get the approval of members?
Mm-hmm.
That's Sarah, that is what the members recommend.
Okay, yeah. So that would reduce the Strathpeffer Residents Association grant by £3,101. So I can let the applicant know in this instance we've been oversubscribed and a reduced offer has been proposed.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that ends your report for today of the grants. Thank you so much. You've been most helpful to us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Now we've got the minutes. We're going to approve the minutes of 137 to 1441. Is that right? Anybody got any comments on them before we end today's meeting? No? Well, that ends our area committee meeting of the 20th of February for Westeros, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh. And thank you so much, members, for attending, and all the officers for giving us their support. Thank you.
Thank you for chairing it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.